There are a lot of topics that I cover both on this channel and in my everyday conversations with authors like you. But there is one topic that I can always count on to strike fear in the hearts of authors, and that is the word platform. So today, I want to talk about why platform is not just some picky thing that publishers want before they'll issue a book deal, but rather, platform is integral to what you are trying to do with your book. And today, I want to talk about how to reset your mindset so you can head in exactly that direction. Stay tuned. Writers often feel called to write a book because they've read something that truly moved, inspired, or changed them. We all feel we have something true to share, but it makes it so intimidating when we're trying to create something that is just as moving and inspiring as that book that changed us. Learning to read like a writer reveals the underlying structure of narrative, showing how and why it speaks to us. It demystifies the process and helps us make decisions for our own work. That's why we started the Page and Podium Book Club. Not just to read lovely memoirs with lovely women, but also to understand how these books work. Each month, we break down a published memoir to see what it's doing under the surface, and your first session is free. Head over to pageandpodium.com/book club to sign up. Anytime we're talking about a deeply personal creative project, one of the baseline requirements for getting through that project is that you find something fun. I know this seems fluffy and soft and woo-woo, but truly, anytime you plan to work on something for a year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, it is so important that there is some part of that process that you actually enjoy. Otherwise, there is literally no way you're going to make it to the end of that finish line having put in the effort and the energy that I know you want. But oftentimes, I find that authors understand this and in fact are pretty good at following through on it when it comes to their book manuscript. On the other hand, when we start to talk about visibility, platform building, being out there talking with the people that you want to reach, well, love to all of my fellow introvert authors. We just hate this idea so very much. And it really does hurt my heart because actually, when we are thinking about making an impact on the world, using your story to literally change people's lives, one of the most important things you can do is actually connect with those people. And that was what I was thinking about when I decided that we needed a video not on practical ways to build your platform and not really even on whether you're ready to build your platform, but rather on the absolutely fundamental building block of platform building, which is mindset. So today, that's what I want to jump into. We're going to start by talking about what we mean by platform. I do find that this is very often misunderstood, and I think understanding what it is we're looking for is going to help you move forward in this particular journey. The second thing we're going to talk about is how platform is actually going to help you. It's not just some picky thing that your publisher wants you to do, but rather it really is something that can weave its way into the book writing process itself. So we can collapse it in with this thing that we actually kind of like doing, the writing part, and find out that actually both of these things are helped by incorporating each other at the same time. And then, of course, y'all know me, I'm not going to leave without giving you some practical tips. So I have my top 3 tips that are going to help you move forward in this platform mindset building journey. All right, so that said, let's jump into it. I want to start by talking about what it is we mean by platform. Now, anytime we're talking about platform, there are really 2 possible ways that we can define this. The first of these is going to be way more common in author circles, in literary spheres, agents, publishers, that kind of thing. But the second is relevant too, even though we see it a little bit more in politics. Okay, so what do we mean when we say platform? The first piece of this definition of platform is that when we think about platform, we're actually just thinking about a connection between you, the person with a message. Sometimes we say thought leader, but author works too as the basis of authority, and connecting that person with the person they want to reach. So, of course, when we're talking about any kind of book, nonfiction, memoir, we are talking about you, the author, speaking directly with the people that you want to help. Now, one thing that I want to make really, really clear here is that there is one persistent misunderstanding of the word platform that so often comes up when we start to talk about this connection with your audience, and that is social media numbers. Now, one of the very, very unfortunate parts, although sometimes it has some good things, of this digital era that we're in is we can so clearly see numerically, objectively, how many people we're reaching. And one of the really unfortunate side effects of that situation is that I find so many authors will set a number for themselves that they will think of as the minimum number for their platform to be valid or legitimate or any of these words that we might use. Oftentimes, what I hear from authors is that they think if they don't have 1 million followers on Instagram or TikTok or whatever the social media of the day is, then they don't have a platform. And that could not be further from the truth. Now, I have kind of a pet example for this. So if you've been watching this channel for long, you may have heard me say this before, but I think it's worth repeating. There are actually really excellent examples in recent literary history that show us that 1 million social media followers may or may not do anything at all with your book. And the best example of it is Justin Timberlake. Now, when Justin Timberlake's memoir came out, of course, his publisher expected that it would have huge, huge sales. After all, this guy has in the 8 figures of social media followers. But when the book came out, what they found was they did not get the conversion rate of 1 to 2 to 5% that we would often think of. Conversion rate being buying that book. Instead, what they found was all those social media followers were great for social media, but they weren't interested in laying down the cash to actually buy the book. Now, this is not to say that Timberlake's book tanked or anything like that. Of course, it still sold very, very well. The point that I want to make is there is no direct and predictable correlation between the number of social media followers you have and the number of books you're going to sell. This can sometimes be a good thing. Oftentimes, books will sell much, much more than we might expect based on social media numbers. Or it can be a bad thing, as in Justin Timberlake's case and many other of these celebrity authors, actually. So how do we want to think about platform then if we're not thinking about it in terms of these numbers of social media followers translating into book sales? That is kind of the easiest way to report it after all, so I get that confusion. Well, I want to give you 3 examples here of different clients that we have worked with at Page and Podium who have really needed to use their platform in really different ways. And all of these people are people that are knocking it out of the park in terms of really leveraging their platform to reach the people they want to reach. So the first example I want to give is Maggie. Now, Maggie works with people who are trying to cut back on their alcohol consumption, and she is someone who went through this herself. Now, one of the cool things about Maggie and her company, Magnify, is that they take a really different position on this. Because Maggie herself was able to come out of a place of alcohol use disorder, what she was able to do was put together a new system that didn't require people to go all or nothing. Now, Maggie will say this might not work for everyone, but she has had amazing results with the people that she has worked with simply by shifting the mindset from all or nothing into this brilliant direction, in my opinion, that rather than focusing on what we are not going to do, which is drink as much, rather, she says, focus on what you are going to do. In her case, and many of her clients' case, that's fitness, but certainly this works with all kinds of things, not even just substance use disorder, all kinds of things. So for Maggie, because the types of people, the sort of demographic of folks she's trying to reach do tend to be a little bit on the younger crowd, 20s into 30s, and because that is a crowd that we know is heavily active on sites like Instagram, it did make sense actually for Maggie to lean into the social media platform building. But I want to contrast her with another client that we worked with, Sarah. Now, Sarah's book is on disability advocacy. It is her own story of sort of coming to terms with who she is, her identity, how she exists in this world, and how she embraces her own sense of difference. But the important thing about Sarah's book is that it's much more literary than what we might think of when we think of kind of these conversational memoirs. Oftentimes, this is what folks want, right? It's like kind of a coffee talk memoir. But we often work with this type of literary memoir as well, where a big part of the process of writing that book is balancing the structure, the kind of overarching weight of what that story is, with the actual language, the poetry, with the symbolism, all that kind of good stuff. So for Sarah, the audience that she was trying to reach was, yes, disability advocates, folks who were kind of thinking through these things for themselves as well. But really, she wanted to tap into that literary memoir market, the folks that like to read memoir because of the beautiful writing, because of a little bit of symbolism, because there is oftentimes just a little bit of pushing against the line of genre. Typically, this is actually what we mean when we talk about literary types of genres. That's what she meant too. So for this type of book, it actually made sense for Sarah, instead of aiming for social media, although certainly her audience is there too, what she wanted to really focus on was trying to place some shorter pieces, shorter literary writing pieces, into literary journals. Now, while this is oftentimes a place that is a little bit more effective for getting an agent to notice you, rather than that direct communication with your reader, we're gonna get both with a literary journal. And certainly, publishing in a literary journal, particularly in a similar topic to what your book is on, can work to build your reputation in the industry, which can be really helpful, not only, again, in getting an agent, getting a publisher, but also you are going to reach some readers that way. But so between Maggie and Sarah, we have really different strategies. With Maggie, she's trying to get out there. She's being herself, conversational, really inviting people kind of into coffee chat with her. Whereas with Sarah, she's really drawing on this kind of artistic side of herself. She's really thinking about how the creativity itself, the writing itself, can really translate into starting to build this reputation for herself, both among her audience, but also, since she was wanting to aim for a traditional book deal, doing it this way is also going to allow her to really speak to agents and publishers. Super smart move. And I want to give a third example because I think it's nice to kind of balance out and really demonstrate that there are all types of ways to build platform. There really is no wrong way. So this example is Brian. Now, Brian is a business coach, and his book is a sort of hybrid memoir leaning much more toward a straight up business book, but of course with his personal spin on it, with his stories, experiences, all of that good stuff that we love. So for Brian, the thing that he was trying to do was really build a regional following. As a business coach, one of the things that Brian specializes in is helping people with local marketing. That's in fact what his company does. So when he wrote this book, he was really interested in using it to expand his connection with that type of folks. So for Brian, there actually were two strategies that I would not really have recommended as much, particularly for Sarah, but probably some for Maggie as well. Those two strategies were, number one, he started doing much more speaking, but he was not looking at webinars, things that were going national. Rather, he was sticking to his regional market because that's who he wanted to reach. He wanted to help people get the word out about their business from him in a way that was his expertise. That's always for him going to be this more kind of local, regional level. So doing a little more speaking, these public keynotes where you're actually there in person, it is just people gathered in your region. Well, that made so much sense for him. And in fact, is a great opportunity to do things like bulk selling your book to conference organizers, making sure that you have talked with the people that are organizing the talk you're going to give and asking whether they have budget to purchase copies for the people in the audience. There are all kinds of ways that public speaking can be really helpful for your platform. But the second way that Brian was building his platform, and I think this is genius actually, was just through regular local and regional networking events. Just simply showing up as himself with a book in hand and talking about the things he had to share was a game changer for him. The more he was able to meet people around his region, ask for more introductions, and of course, leverage that into his speaking, the more his authentic platform, his connection with readers, grew. He didn't even have to spend any time at all on social media. Of course he did, but truly it was this personal, in-person connection that really drove Brian's platform. And I think that's such an important thing to think about, because so often when we get in this platform building mindset, what I see from authors is that the thing they're really interested in is proving they're good enough. The thing they're really looking to do is get that number high enough that the publishers will just get off their back. And this is not the way, friends. Because one thing I will tell you about all three of these authors is that connecting with the people who would be their readers was one of the most powerful things that they could do for themselves. So, yes, two of the three, Maggie and Sarah, are publishing traditionally. So of course, that's going to be a little bit different than if you are strategically leveraging something like self-publishing, like Brian was, to really make sure your book gets to who you want it to get to. But in all cases, regardless of the type of publishing, this platform building activity really paid off. And that brings me to the second part of our definition of platform. And that is one thing that we usually think about when we're thinking about politicians. So when we think about a political platform, typically what we're thinking about are the particular issues and that politician's stance on those issues. Now, this is usually not what a publisher or an agent is meaning by platform. So I just want to say that so you're not going to put this into your book proposal. This isn't really what we mean when we talk about platform in that way. But I think for mindset building, having this second piece of the puzzle can be such a game changer. And the reason is, when we think about our platform as being the things that we want to speak about, the things that we feel really strongly, really passionately about, the things our readers need to hear, it can be so helpful when we pack that into platform building to get us away from this kind of objective, numerical-based evaluation of ourselves and into a much, much more authentic, genuine space that I do find most authors work better from. So when we're thinking about this second definition of platform, what we're thinking about is dialing in what it is you want to say. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit more about why this is important and how it factors in, but for now, just keep that in mind. We've got kind of a two-pronged definition going here, with one of the definitions of platform being connecting with the people that you want to help, connecting with your readers, your audience. But the second one is dialing in that message and having a very, very clear set of opinions, set of things that you stand for. And when you do that, you put yourself in such a better position to really move forward with the numerical objective building part because you're so solid on the really authentic messaging piece. Okay, with that said, I want to transition now into my second point, which is that this idea of platform, I know it feels like this sort of like poopy thing that the publishers and agents dreamed up to make you do, and we all hate it. But really, this is not the way, friends. So I want to talk about some of the things that building your platform can do for you that you might not have thought of. So the first of these is an example from an author we worked with years ago, Victor. And one of the things that he found as he was working on building his platform was that by being out there, by kind of reaching out to people that he wanted to read his book, he was able to hear from people that his book really changed their lives, and he was able to hear it directly. Of course, we all love to see those Amazon reviews. If you have friends who are authors, leave them reviews, please, we love it. But the other piece of this is just directly hearing from folks who have been changed by your message. In Victor's case, one of the things that he really wanted to do was reach men who were in prison. He had specifically come up, and his book was about coming up in the suburbs of Detroit. And as an adult, as a young adult, and currently now, he was really involved actively in helping the youth in his community to really have adults that they could look up to really have people that were invested in their growth, to really have people who could mentor them and shape them, who they could come to with their everyday problems and their big, big dreams. So Victor is one of these folks, and part of what his book was doing, I think this is so beautiful, was not only telling the story of how he did that, it also was continuing to do that work by getting the story out. And one of the things that I loved so much, within just a couple of weeks actually of his book coming out, he was getting letters from prisons, from people who had read that book, who connected with where he came from, who really saw themselves in his younger self and really wanted that mentor figure that he was promising, that he was offering to younger folks now. So that is so, so powerful. When we think about doing this work, when we think about trying to change the world, this is a tall, tall order, and we will not get through it unless we find ways to re-energize ourselves. Well, every author I know is going to be re-energized by getting letters from people whose lives were actually changed, who read your book and were inspired to do something different, who read your book and learned something that helped how they lived their lives. What's more amazing than that? So when we are thinking about platform building, I just really want you to keep that center in your heart. Yes, publishers and agents are going to want particular numbers and particular evidence that you know how to build a platform. That is true. But it's also so, so valuable that you are hearing from the people that you are helping directly. It's one of the very few things that we have to hold on to when times get tough. And oh my gosh, it is difficult to overstate the energizing value of something like that. Okay, the second reason that platform building is not just some picky thing that your publisher wants you to do is that by building your platform, you are constantly honing, refining, and dialing in your message. Now, I have talked very, very often on this channel about the importance of message, about how to really figure out what it is you want to say. And of course, we recommend that every single person that is writing a memoir define both their topic and their message before they even start writing. Super, super key. This is part, by the way, of our step-by-step process of moving through the development of your memoir, culminating in an outline and writing plan that you can use. We have this as a step-by-step format in the Memoir Method, our group coaching program. If you feel like that might be helpful, head over to pageandpodium.com/memoir-method. But the point that I want to make here is that even though before you start writing, you do need to have a sense of your topic and your message, one thing that will inevitably happen is that as you continue to exercise that message, it's going to get clearer, it's going to get much, much more refined, and you are very likely to feel much more passionate about it, even than when you began. I know sometimes that's hard to imagine, but truly. So this is something that I have actually experienced myself and with many, many of my business coaching clients, is that as you are out there talking about your message, as you are sharing your perspective, you are hearing from people, you're getting their feedback on what they liked, what they didn't like. You are speaking through some of the nuances and intricacies of your message in a way that's going to help you catch inconsistencies. It's going to help you catch kind of ways that you can really lean into the interesting parts, the really unique parts. And it helps you find the thing that is allowing you to stand out. Now, this is so, so important. In business, we call this your differentiator. And a differentiator is just effectively the thing that you are doing differently than everybody else in your industry. Now, I want to kind of leverage this into the third reason that it is really, really important to be out there talking about and building your platform. And I want to use for this one an example. So this example is Lisa Katona-Smith. Her book, Parallel Recovery, came out just a few months ago at the point that I'm recording this. And one thing about this book is that it is revolutionary. It is groundbreaking in the way that Lisa is helping people that she is speaking to. Now, Lisa Katona-Smith's book is about how families of people with substance use disorder can really work on their own mental health, on their own relationships, so that as their loved one comes through recovery, they have something really good, strong, solid, loving to come home to. Of course, this makes sense. If you have ever known anyone that was struggling with substance use disorder or really any other serious mental health problem, oftentimes the family falls apart as much as the person does. Lisa's entire message is the family must be solid and stable and ready for that person to recover. And we know this from data. We know that people are so much more likely to get better when they have something to get better for. Now, if this is resonating, if you want to pick this book up, you can buy it wherever you like to buy books. It's called Parallel Recovery by Lisa Katona-Smith, MED. But the point that I want to make here is that Lisa's differentiator is very, very clear. Whereas what she saw when her own son was going through substance use disorder was that everyone just wanted them to leave him alone. Everyone wanted them to have no contact, to force him to get better. And what Lisa saw was that was a totally dysfunctional way to go about it. In the book, she even talks about speaking with experts and realizing that while experts have a lot of amazing things to share, they don't have all the answers either. And this is a really, really different message in the substance use disorder recovery space. Very, very often that space is dominated by AA and other types of programs. And this, by the way, is something that Maggie has gotten at too. So when Lisa is out there talking about her message, really dialing in this differentiator, which is work that she really did before the book came out as well, one thing that is really happening is that her message is being shown more and more and more and more. Now, in our algorithm-driven world, all of us, I know, are trying to go to the top of that Google search. There is nothing more coveted than having someone Google your topic and have your name show up first. We especially love it if it's in a Google panel. But at any rate, the thing we're trying to do is get Google to recognize us as the expert in our niche. Well, one of the best ways to do this is to be out there talking about your message in a way that emphasizes your differentiator. So as Lisa was doing this, one of the things that is inevitably going to happen is that as substance use disorder gets talked about more and more, as people are Googling, there are more areas that she can show up. She's got her very active Instagram. She's got video reels that she puts out. She's doing interviews, podcast interviews, and live interviews. She is speaking places, and she's creating partnerships with different types of organizations that help people who need her work. She's doing all of the things. All of it, by the way, very authentic, very aligned. All of it things that she would want to do anyway, regardless of who thinks she should build a platform. And that is the third thing that is so important that really takes platform building out of this kind of picky publisher mindset and into the real goals I know you have for your book. And that is when you are talking about your message, you not only, number 2, dial it in, you also, number 3, help it show up in the algorithm. That means when people are Googling, they find your message rather than the others. And OMG, that matters so much when you are somebody like Lisa, who is really trying to change the field, really trying to disrupt the way things have been done. Okay, I promised you that we would not leave this video without a few practical mindset tips. So let's dive into that so that you have somewhere to go with this now that I know we have some different ways of thinking about platform building. Okay, I've got 3 of them. So the first tip that I want to give you for really dialing in this mindset is I want you to remember that even though we often think about expertise as being something that goes with a set of letters behind your name, I totally get this, we have to keep front and center the fact that our expertise is expertise that no one else has. And how do I know that? Because if you are writing a book and you are using your personal experience in any way to drive the things you are saying, no one else can write that exact book. That is your book. Now, does that mean we're an expert? Well, of course, there's a lot that we can say about this. And in fact, several months ago, we have a video podcast episode and blog called Promotion When You Don't Feel Like an Expert. Head back to that video. You'll get some really practical tips on how to really find your expertise when you don't feel like you should be kind of out there speaking about this thing quite yet. But the thing that I really want you to keep in mind here is when you're thinking about expertise, expertise is always multifaceted. There always is going to be the type of expertise that we usually associate with those letters behind the name. Typically, this is either all bookwork, all studying, or it is studying with some kind of application component. But that is a particular type of expertise, right? Doctors, lawyers, judges, these types of folks, we think of them as having that type of expertise. But there also is a type of expertise that really doesn't have anything to do with the letters behind your name, and yet that type of expertise, paradoxically, is often much more needed than the letters behind the name type. Let me give you an example here. We worked with a client a couple of years ago who was working on a book about caring for her elders, caring for her parents, and she also had a grandmother that was living in her home while she was raising her own children and trying to build a business. Well, this is a lot to handle. Now, when we started talking about, well, how are you going to kind of build this platform? How will you think about your message? One of the real hesitations was that elder care is the domain of the people with letters after their name, right? Elder care has a lot to do with medical types of things, physical therapy types of things. So who was she to talk about what elder care meant? Well, I guarantee you, there are many, many people doing elder care who have access to somebody with letters after their name, but who do not have anyone to talk to who is in the same boat as them, who does not consider themselves an expert. And yet, here they are. Well, when we think about, is she an expert? Even though she doesn't have letters behind her name, of course she is. She was building a successful business while raising her kids and caring for her parents and grandparent. Of course she's an expert. Of course. It's a different type of expertise, but it is undisputable that if you have that life experience, people do want to hear from you. So as you're thinking about this idea of how you're going to move forward with your platform building mindset, really try to keep that in mind. There are lots and lots of ways that expertise shows up. Letters behind the name is just one. But when you're telling your story, when you're sitting with that information, when you're really thinking through what your experiences have taught you, you are in so many ways becoming much, much more of an expert than anybody else you're going to run into on the street. Let's use that and make sure people can benefit from your wisdom. Okay, the second practical tip I want to give you on this platform building mindset is remember, I know anytime you're starting any kind of new visibility strategy, it is always going to feel and look awkward at first. What I mean by that is anytime you think about starting something, say like reels or videos, or even blog posts, even photo posts on Instagram, probably your first attempts will not be great. Now, somebody I was chatting with the other day, and I mentioned if you go back and look at the early episodes of this podcast on YouTube, I'll tell you, I'm not embarrassed of them because they were an attempt. I think they're pretty good content, but you will notice that they are not as solid and strong and stable. They are certainly not as dialed in terms of the message as the episodes you see now. So, by the way, I do invite you, go back and look at some of those early episodes because it is kind of a wild ride. So the tip I want to give you here is, yes, it will be awkward at first. Yes, as you are getting out there, you will do some things that you will later say, oh, wish I would have done that a little bit different. But the thing I want to remind you is that time flies. You will be astonished if you start now how you will think about platform building in 6 months. If you can put in that 6 months of just consistently showing up, being visible, trying out this strategy that you think is going to work for you, that you think you will enjoy, one thing that you will find is you'll be so much better in 6 months. You will be able to, like me, kind of laugh at yourself in the past and really just embrace and acknowledge the fact that you had to start somewhere. But oh my goodness, how quickly we can grow when we put ourselves into that place. Okay, and the third practical mindset tip, I just want to encourage you to face your actual fears. Now, what do I mean by this? Well, one thing that I find is that when I'm talking with authors about building their platform, there is a lot of fear. Oftentimes, folks will say things to me like, well, the trolls though, or I don't want people to come at me, or I'm a private person and I'm nervous that people are going to kind of come after me, come after my family. I cannot assure you that that won't happen. Of course not. And some of the risk of that does depend on what your topic is, how you've written the book, who you are. But what I can tell you is that I think much more often, if we dig down in that fear, if we really think about what's behind that fear, I think just as often, the fear is actually that you will show up, try to be visible, and no one will pay attention. So, the reason I really want you to reflect on this, journal on it, if you like to journal, you know I love a journal, is that when you really think about what's the actual fear I have, very, very often we will find that that fear is actually less scary once we name it. Once we let ourselves feel the feeling of that particular fear, very, very often we are in a better position to move forward, either without that fear or usually more likely with that fear, but a lot of bravery to counteract it. So as you're thinking through, I want you to really reflect not only then on the fears, what is the actual fear you have, but also where's that fear coming from? Is that something that's coming from a childhood memory? Is it something that's coming from a bad experience that you've had in your career growth? Where is that fear coming from? Is that something that we can tackle actually separate from the platform building? Is that something that you can kind of work on just getting a little more kind of mentally healthy in that area, getting a little bit more resilient in that area? Is that something that you can work on parallel to your platform building so that you don't have to knock it out before you get started? In fact, you can embrace that sense that you are an expert. You can move forward and really remind yourself that you're going to be better very, very soon. And in doing that process, you're also going to let your body, your mind, your nervous system know that it is safe to do this. That yes, there are some threats. Yes, we do need to be careful in this world. But more often than not, the things that you're going to experience are actually not going to be nearly as bad as you think. And the only thing really to do is to move on forward. Unfortunately, platform building is one of those areas where there is nowhere out but through. But I know you can make it through. Okay, as we're heading into this new year of 2026, one of the things I really want to remind you is that there is support for your book. Yes, I know it feels like you should be able to DIY it, but truly, I want you to not only have an excellent finished product, excellent, big 5 level, I also want you to enjoy the process of writing it. And very, very often when we are so tied to this DIY idea, we not only sacrifice the quality that our book could have, we also sacrifice the fun. So if I can interest you in joining a group of amazing women who are all first-time memoir authors to get the support, to get the training, to get the community that makes memoir writing such a joy of our lives, I hope you'll reach out. You can read more at pageandpodium.com/memoir-method or sign up to have a call with me, it's directly with me, by visiting pageandpodium.com/contact. I can't wait to hear about your book. In the meantime, please rate, review, subscribe, share episodes that are useful, and particularly if you are on a podcast app, I would love to have your review. We're a little newer there, and it would be really helpful to have some of that momentum. So if this has been helpful, please leave us a review, and otherwise, I can't wait to hear from you. Happy writing! You've been writing your memoir, maybe even for years. You know your material, you know what it means. What's missing isn't the story, it's the structure. And that's why we started the Memoir Method Book Club. Every single month, Emily Thrash, a professional writer and editor, teaches you how to read like a writer by breaking down a published memoir and showing you what it's doing under the surface. Your first session is free. Head over to pageandpodium.com/book club to sign up.